Okay, hello everyone. I'm Tom Beeks and I'm the e-moderator for today's webinar. And I'm joined by Caroline Bruce, who's also going to be helping us collate questions and be responding in the chat. Um, if you have any tech issues, please refer to my colleague Lizzie, and she will get back to you as soon as she can in the chat as well. So I'm really delighted to introduce our amazing panel of speakers today who will be sharing with us their insights on how schools can work effectively with families of multilingual learners. So just very quickly at the beginning, if we could just go to our panelists, and if you could just tell us your name, the organisation you represent, and where you're joining us from today. Heather.
Hello everyone, I'm Heather Rolfe. I'm Director of Research at the think tank British Future, and I'm joining you from London, where it sounds like I'm having very similar weather to the rest of you, except for those in Qatar and maybe Cornwall.
Thank you, Heather. And Gemma.
Hi, I am Gemma Davis. I am the Programme Director with Learning with Parents. I'm joining you from Bristol. I would say right now, all of the weathers that have been described are happening outside. Sunny at the back, grey and rainy at the front.
Lovely, thank you, Gemma. And lastly, Sue here.
Hi everybody, my name is Sufia Amin. I'm an assistant head at Kensington Primary and a specialist lead in education for multilingualism, or EAL. I'm in London, and right now the sun is shining, which is such a relief because when we started it was pouring down. So I'm in the sunny element right now.
Lovely, thank you. Just a quick notification to everyone before we get started that you can use Zoom, as I'm sure you're all familiar, to ask questions and interact in the chat. The chat box can get a bit crazy and busy at times, so I do recommend that if you just keep the chat to comments that are relevant to what's happening on screen, and please use the Q&A box for any actual questions you'd like to put to our panelists, and we will have a Q&A section at the end. Yeah, enjoy the webinar. So, as we've already discussed, we're going to be talking about working with multilingual families. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce, first of all, Heather Rolfe, who's going to be talking to us about the research that she's been doing with her organisation, British Future. And as Heather's just mentioned, she's a Director of Research at British Future, and she's a recognised expert on immigration and in the field of social research. And the research that she's been doing is especially relevant to today because she was the research lead for the Welcoming Committee for Hong Kongers, which coordinates and supports the work of organisations across the UK to support newly arrived Hong Kongers. And the committee's work has had a strong focus on education as well as employment and support for integration and settlement. And she's going to share with us what her research tells us about working with multilingual families, especially those that are newly arrived in the UK. So over to you, Heather.
Thanks very much, Tom. So
I'm going to stop sharing.
Can you see my screen? Okay, yeah, good.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to see if I can get rid of the top bit so I can see my slides better. Yes, I can. So why is this topic important? And I think there's sort of two main issues for me, and what's really underlined the research that I've been doing in recent years is, first of all, that schools can help ensure that pupils who are new to the UK achieve their best, not only just academically, but in their life. And then there's also the fact that schools have a much wider role to play in helping families to integrate and in building cohesive communities. So schools and teachers are really crucial to that process. And I'm going to draw evidence from two projects. And the first one of these is research I did when I was at National Institute of Economic and Social Research with my colleague Chiara Manzoni. And we looked at what different schools were doing. We were looking for good practice in help settling and integrating migrant pupils, particularly in English language. That's the first project. And then the second one which Tom kindly mentioned, is the Hong Kong Welcome Programme, where we looked into the issue of education and schools in some depth, and we produced a specific report on it, which you can see from this slide. So the top slide is the front cover of the Hong Kong report, and the bottom one, you can't really see it, but we asked pupils that we interviewed for that project to design a leaflet about what they would tell new pupils to the school, and they come up with some lovely ideas, and you can't really read them, but you get the idea from the slide. So I'm just trying to, can't get the slide to move. Oh, sorry, I'm having difficulty. Oh, here we go. So just a little bit of context. I'm going to go through this really quickly because the Bell Foundation has produced some amazing materials on this, which you can obviously have access to. But just to put what we're discussing today in context, so more than 1 in 5 pupils are EAL learners, and over half of schools in England have EAL pupils. Big variation across the country, obviously. And so in around 1 in 10 schools, about half of pupils speak EAL, and you have particular pockets of EAL learners, so major cities principally. And some schools have very few. And then there's challenges, but also opportunities for schools. And one of the challenges is that migrant pupils are a very diverse group with diverse needs. You can't just lump them all in together, as I'm sure you know. But also because of that, English language support needs do vary a lot, so that some arrive with little English, some arrive with quite a lot. There's also other issues in addition to English language, which mean that more support is needed by the school, particularly loss, trauma, issues for refugees and asylum seekers. And then there are issues in identifying special needs other than language. And then the funding issue, which we're probably going to hear quite a lot about today, and you'll be aware of. I was interested to see that around 40% of you here today are EAL leads, so that's really interesting. And then I think then the opportunities for schools is that EAL pupils start behind, but very soon they catch up, and the latest research shows they actually outperform pupils without EL needs. And I think so the challenge for schools now is to ensure that that stays like that, and actually maybe even gets higher. So on to the main topic that I'm going to be talking about, so about engaging parents and families. And so why is this important? And I think the first thing that we found in our research, particularly with Hong Kong BNOs, but other migrant parents, is that children are often a really strong priority for new migrants, and they want them to succeed. And in some of those cases, it's, they haven't really had much of a choice about leaving where they come from. In other cases, they've made a decision to move, often in quite difficult circumstances, to move for the sake of the lives of their future lives of their children. And that does apply quite strongly to Hong Kong BNOs, in that some people in Hong Kong were forced to leave, political activists who were scared about imprisonment, and others felt that they needed to because Hong Kong was no longer a democratic society and they didn't want their children to be brought up in that kind of environment. So schooling for parents of children from Hong Kong is very important. And then another reason why schools are so important is that or that the relationship between migrant parents and schools is so important, is that schools can understand the needs of pupils better if they know more about their families and their background to arriving in the UK. And they can do that through engaging with parents. You can do it to a certain degree by engaging with the children, depending on their age, but obviously not the very young children. And then I think another reason why integration by contact and engagement with parents is so important is that schools can actually help migrant parents to integrate with other parents, because often new arrivals experience isolation, and so Hong Kong BNOs in particular spread out all over the UK, so there aren't really strong supportive communities, and that does apply to other migrant groups too, including asylum seekers who are in dispersed areas, not in contact necessarily with other families from a similar background. And then why can it be difficult to work with families? So one of the barriers is obviously the proficiency of some parents themselves. And I think actually, so what we found with BNOs, but also this does apply to other groups as well, it's not necessarily that they don't know how to speak English, because in Hong Kong, for example, it is an official language, but they lack confidence in spoken English, kind of colloquial English. And also they lack confidence in approaching schools. Schools in the UK are very different to in Hong Kong, very different to in other countries, where the relationship between the school and the home is much more formal. And so the idea of having kind of an informal approach to school and to teachers is not a common one. It's not a common experience. The other thing is that new arrivals to the UK can be facing a lot of difficulties with settling into their new lives. And so one of those issues can be housing, and that would apply obviously particularly to asylum seeker and refugee families. But for other people who come for work, or like BNOs who come for broadly political reasons, it's quite difficult for them to find a job. And so they can be, their mental energies can be taken up with having to find a job, and then often taking jobs with difficult hours, so that they're not necessarily able to have that contact with the school that they would like. And also I think financial worries are a reason why some parents don't have contact with the school. It's just all consuming if you're dealing with debt and difficulties like that. And I've mentioned the differences between the UK and the country of origin can make it difficult. So that applies to the relationship between the school and parents, but also all other aspects of the UK can be different, and actually different in ways that migrants had not necessarily anticipated, particularly if they had some kind of familiarity with the UK in the past, as parents from countries that were associated with the UK can have. And it can be a bit of a shock when it's just not like that. And then also I think parents may not be aware of the ways in which the school can help. So we found in the work I did with Chiara Manzoni, we found that a lot of schools were really, doing all they could to help migrant parents. And but parents were often unaware and didn't really want to approach the school. And then no recourse to public funds is significant for some groups, because we found that some Hong Kongers felt that they couldn't ask for help from the school because the terms of their visa meant they had no recourse to public funds, which they interpreted in a broad sense rather than just being able to claim benefits. And they were worried that if it came to light that they'd been seeking help from the school and the school had provided, it could affect their path to citizenship, which is very important for Hong Kongers and other migrants. But what do parents want from schools? Well, actually, when you ask migrant parents what do they want from schools, they do want to know a lot. And that's because the issues that I mentioned earlier, that school and education is incredibly important to many migrant parents. And generally they lack awareness about school life. And this is a list of some of the things they want to know: the whole school day, kind of what happens, lunches, what sort of equipment they need, and then the curriculum, what are children taught in school, and then homework. It's very important to many migrant parents, especially if they're from cultures where homework has been, where there's high expectations for after school input. And some parents are quite surprised at that homework requirements are much less in the UK than they used to. But anyway, they want to know what's expected. And then assessment of progress. Obviously, migrant parents want to know, how is my child progressing? That's very important. They want feedback on progress and how that's going to be delivered. And then what kind of support there will be for their child's learning. Also then, how is the school going to communicate with them? How are they going to tell them if something's good or something's bad or something's happening? And that's very important. And then after school activities, very important. And that actually can be where a parent has a choice about which school to go to. Things like after school activities, as well as performance, Ofsteds and so on, is important to them. So I've looked in both the projects I mentioned about how schools welcome new students. And I think really there's a big variety of approaches here. And I think one thing to say is that schools who are more used to welcoming migrants generally do have more developed approaches, and than schools that don't, and that wouldn't be really a surprise to you. I think some of the activities, some of the approaches here, a lot of you on the call will be familiar with, and you'll know much more about it than I do, but this is an observation really from the projects about what the kind of general approach is. So a welcome meeting, that seems to be quite standard, and then who the parents and the child meet is different in each school. Can be senior people, might be others, and there's sometimes a tour of the school, not always. I think buddy systems seem to be very common, but I think the extent to which the sort of detail of the buddy system varies quite a lot. I remember when I was a child, I moved around quite a lot, and even back then there was always some kind of buddy system, but it was very informal, and you just sat next to the child, and usually they distance themselves from you very quickly. But some buddy systems, they have, they're much more organized with training and sometimes pairing pupils with someone from their mother tongue. And training, as I said, training of the buddies varies. And some schools actually, we found staff and pupil mentoring, which was good. We found that more in secondary schools than primary schools. And then a booklet, sometimes in different languages, to welcome pupils. So English language support, I'm aware that there's a lot of EAL leads on the call who'll know much more about this than I do, and about what practice is usual in schools. But our observations from the research are that obviously EAL is an important part, that the assessment is an important part to pupil induction, and it guides the kind of support that a child will then be given. And then there's usually a test, obviously. And but then the kind of support given doesn't necessarily depend on what the school thinks is best, but it is guided by funding, and which I don't think that would be a surprise to any of you on the call. But we found in the schools that we visited that the most common form is support in the classroom, and then additional support outside of that. I mean, I think there probably is somewhere some kind of survey data on all of this, which I would be keen to see. But from what we've picked up, this seems to be the preferred approach. Keep in the classroom as much as possible, from the point of view that then the child is able to learn about all the other subjects as well. And I'm just having a, oh, sorry, I've gone too quickly. And then there are different approaches in schools, like homework clubs, language clubs, that kind of thing, particularly in secondary schools. Those seem to be reasonably common. I think we also found in our visits, particularly for the Hong Konger project, that there were speakers of mother tongue languages, in that case Cantonese, there were more informal opportunities. And actually from the previous project as well, large secondary schools, particularly in areas like London, where teachers were from different backgrounds, and there were often people with teachers with mother tongue who could speak to pupils informally and offer some kind of mentoring. And then some schools have pupil or staff ambassadors and mentors, which seems good practice. And then as I said earlier, really the range of types of support are higher in more diverse schools, and probably in larger schools as well. So what might, I must speed up a bit actually, because I'm up against my 15 minutes. So what might good practice look like? So first of all, school tours, welcome board, these are some ideas from the research. So having a diverse intake, having diverse teachers helps where that's possible. And then involving migrant pupils in extracurricular activities where they can mix informally with other pupils. Involving parents in the social life of the school, very important to reduce isolation, as I mentioned. And then there's all the kind of translation services, helping families to access other forms of support are very important given the situation of many migrants, and then creating opportunities for social mixing. And then training for teachers on EAL and supporting migrant pupils in particular. I just want to say something really brief. Cultural and language continuation is important because parents, and to a certain degree pupils, but particularly parents, want their children to maintain a sense of their own cultural identity. And so some schools that we visited on the Hong Konger project and the other one stock mother tongue library books. And also secondary schools give opportunities for pupils to study for a GCSE in their own language. And then I mentioned the role of staff members here as well, providing opportunities for informal discussion and talking about their culture. So recommendations. So for schools, recommendations are that there's better and more formal welcoming and induction, so more consistency in that, a range of EAL learning activities, and then recruiting a diverse workforce with home languages for migrant pupils, inviting parents, crucially important, offering those cultural continuation activities, and then providing CPD. And then for the government, very important recommendations, the EAL funding. And then I think there's also, which I can talk about this later if you're interested, I think there's a need for a greater understanding of reasons why migrant children are here. And I think the DFE could provide schools with that kind of information, which is often lacking. And then, as I've said, there's a need for migrant children to be part of teacher training. And then lastly, but very importantly, for schools to be included in social cohesion strategies. So that's it. I look forward to your questions and the discussion later.
Thank you so much, Heather. That's really interesting stuff, and really gives us a really good broad overview of the context in which our multilingual families are facing at the moment. So, Gemma, if you'd like to share your slides, I'll pass over to Gemma, who joins us from the charity Learning with Parents, where she's program director, and she's going to tell us all about how to foster parental engagement. So over to you, Gemma.
Thank you. Sorry, I nearly forgot to unmute myself then before I started speaking. So I'm going to talk kind of quite generally about parental engagement in learning, because I know I don't want to steal Sophia's thunder on all the amazing work that she and her school do. Just very quickly, Learning with Parents is a charity that works with UK state primary schools, and we work to help support schools try to develop better parental engagement in learning. So we have school programs that work with those schools, and we're tech-based, and so the data that we collect through our programs allows us to kind of do lots of research and create insights into all sorts of things around engagement at home and home learning that then we can feed back into our programs and with the schools we work with. So just to give you an idea of where our work is. When we use the term parents, as in me and my organisation, we use it in an umbrella term, and I think that's really, really important to kind of know and acknowledge that home lives, we all know, can be complex and varied, and so we use that term parents to reference parents, but also maybe carers, grandparents, siblings, anyone really who is at home with children and can take an active and interested role in children's learning beyond the classroom. So when, like I've said, I am talking about parental engagement, it is parental engagement in learning. So that is all about supporting parents to take an active role and interest in their children's learning, to really help schools in general value the knowledge that parents have about their children, because parents are the expert. in their children. They're with them the most in their lives. They've taught them all the way through from early years all the way to when they join school. They are their child's first teacher. The difference is that they're not trained in the skills of an educator. So we all know how important school is. I used to be a primary school teacher, you know, that role in a child's education is crucial. But then how do we help parents at home have those interactions that support and embed a child's learning beyond the classroom, you know, really help kind of make it real world. When we think about how we put together parental engagement activities and things like that, we are always thinking about those kind of 4 words I've put in bold at the bottom around learning through play, learning through talk and discussion, exploration and collaboration. And that's where parents have such a unique like powerful opportunity to help support their children's learning. Oh, my slides have gone in a funny order, but that is okay. I just wasn't expecting to say this to you now. So I'm going to skip ahead and then I'm going to flip back. So when we think about supporting home learning and supporting parents to understand their or support their child, home learning, the first thing that I think is always really important is to come at it from a point of being asset-based, really celebrating and helping parents understand what they are already doing and what they can already do. Because I think often parents will send their children to school and then that's it. That's where their children learn, and then they come home. And there was kind of talk about how migrant parents might be surprised at the type of homework or the amount of homework, especially at maybe primary school, that their children are expected to do. But actually, what we do as an organisation is really try to think through and identify the barriers that all parents face, and they are varied. But if we think about those barriers and how we can address those barriers, then we can think about how to make home learning and helping parents to understand their role in their child's education much more accessible. So really thinking about where parents fit and how we can empower them to see themselves as an equal part in their child's educational journey. I've got that kind of diagram up there of being asset-based at the bottom and then identifying a barrier. So in what we're talking about today in EAL is a barrier for some parents to help support their children at home. So then what are you going to do about it? And because it's so nuanced and families are so varied and homes are so varied, there's not one size fits all answer. So it's really about testing out different approaches. For example, making things as visual for parents as we do for children, using pictures to explain a concept or video content to explain, using simple language. Or it could be about encouraging reading or interacting around home learning in their home language. But if you're doing that, thinking about what language you're expecting parents to know. And that goes beyond EAL, but actually schools use lots and lots of terms like place-based value, for example, or part-whole models. I'm using primary terms. I apologise to secondary staff right now. But actually, beyond EAL parents, those terms are confusing for lots and lots of parents. So really thinking about the language that's being used and making it simple and making it accessible is, you know, a really good way of testing how to lower that barrier for those parents. Then you're kind of applying that to whatever you're doing, and you're learning and you're seeing what's working, and then that feeds into identifying a new barrier perhaps, or the same barrier, and thinking about how to reach those parents. By taking that approach over time, you hopefully see more parent and child interactions. I just always feel like it's really important to say the biggest barrier that parents always tell us about is fun and child enjoyment. If their children are enjoying what they're doing at home, it is so much easier for them to help to support them. And I'm sure any parents here listening to this can relate to that. If your child's not enjoying what they're doing at home, it is so much harder. But it's not ever a barrier that when we go and speak to schools is spoken about. So that is really key. And that's why we always kind of put that as a thread, you know, making learning really fun, enjoyable, and relevant to real life. If you kind of could step back and think about what would really support embedding a child's learning at home, is it your worksheets and things that maybe traditionally lots of parents and families expect, or is it giving them a way of exploring practically the learning that has happened in the classroom, enabling them to give real world culturally relevant experiences in home language, whatever language that is, you know, to really explore the learning and celebrate what's happening. That sentence there where you can teach. I've rehearsed this sentence so much, and every single time I say you can't, you can teach a child to read in school, but you can't teach a complete love of reading purely in school. And that's where parents really come in. So really kind of thinking about parents in that way. And I'm going to flip back to this because it's kind of 3 questions that I would pose any member of staff in a school to think about when they're thinking about the parents coming in. How do your parents feel when they first visit your school? What is your first impression to those parents? Do your parents have a consistent experience in school from every member of staff? Is everybody bought in to working with your parents in the same way so that they always know what's going to happen? They always have that consistent experience. And do your parents feel valued? Do they feel like you're giving them the opportunities and the power to realise the difference they can make and the role they can play in their children's education? So I'm going to hopefully have created a parental engagement platform so for Sophia to talk about the amazing work she does in her school.
Thank you, Gemma. That's really great. I do have one quick question that just came up, which I'll ask you now because it's directly relevant to you, which is does Learning with Parents work in Wales, or is it just with English schools?
Yeah, we do work. We currently only work with one Welsh school, but we do work with a Welsh school. Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, lovely. So sorry. I'll pass you over now to Sophia, and she probably needs a little introduction to those of you who are EAL specialists. But Sophia is assistant head at Kensington Primary. She's a specialist lead in education for multilingualism, and she's got a wealth of first-hand experience in supporting multilingual pupils and their families. So I will pass over to Sophia to give you a sort of at the coalface view of working with families.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you to Heather and Gemma for sharing your insights. I learned a lot, taking loads of notes. And yeah, welcome everybody. So I want to share with you how our school works effectively with families of multilingual learners. Just a little bit of a context about my school. We're in East London in Manor Park, Newham. We have 3 form entries, so 650 pupils approximately, with around 50 languages, which is changing all the time because we have a high mobility rate. So children come and go quite quickly. And so it's, you know, keeping a track of all the languages is quite difficult sometimes, but approximately 50 languages. And we have a very high mobility rate in the area. And also our population of our community, our school community is really rich, it's really diverse. And actually, if I really unpick it, there's probably more than 50 languages. And the situations parents come from, the families come from are very different, but a lot of our families have no recourse to public funds. So you might have just a few that are refugees or asylum seekers, but most of our parents, a big chunk of our parents, because they're migrants in different ways, they have no recourse to public funds. And just a little bit of context about why I use multilingualism. So in our school, you know, about 92% EAL. We changed our approach towards languages. We celebrate and we teach all languages at the school, which is, yeah, it's a bit of a mission, but this is what we do. So this is why my title's changed to multilingual. So I'm a specialist in multilingualism. And actually we teach about multilingualism in our school and we celebrate all the languages in different ways across the lessons, in the curriculum and with the community. So just give you context. So when you're seeing things, you'll be like, oh, that's how she's able to do that, just to give you an idea. And how do you partner for success with multilingual families? Now, everybody's spoken about barriers, and I need to touch on barriers as well, maybe from a different point of view, from on the ground point of view. So the first one's situational. So often our families have no connections. So if they have no connections, that's a barrier. They don't have a community around them. I think as Heather spoke before, having such a diverse group and parents coming in and leaving actually quite quickly sometimes, it's very hard for them to make those connections. Also, the locality of the building sometimes can make it harder for them to come in. A lot of our parents are working long hours or working unsociable hours. So for them to come in, it might be difficult. There might be many people bringing in the child that live with the family. Living situations of our children, not all of them, but a lot of our children live in multiple accommodations. So like many families in one house. So just thinking about the situation our families are in, can make it harder for them to come in, or for us to understand who is in that family, who is part of that the family that is bringing up that child. Also thinking about a multilingual, so the multilingual is not a barrier, but I just put multilingual there, try and encapsulate that we live in a monolingual society. So your school might be a monolingual school, right? So you're just teaching English, everything is English, and these families have a wealth of languages and they're coming in and they can't see themselves. They can't see representations of themselves. People look for somebody that looks like them. I'm like that. I go to different areas to support schools. And when I go to this train station, I'm always coming out the train station, looking at the shops. And when I go to the school, I see the communities and I see who looks like me as well. It's just habit. We all do that. So actually when families are coming in, they're looking for people that look like them, that sound like them, and even amongst staff. So being a minority can be a barrier as well. And also thinking of the relationship with staff. Often the first people that meet and greet the families are the ones that have the strongest connections. So who is doing the meet and greet? If it's SLT, great. Or if it's a core big group of staff. If it's the office members, which is still great, then actually who are they connecting with? Where is that connection coming from? And who are they creating those sense of belonging with? And the final barrier, I'd say, is attitudes. It's not the parents' attitudes, I'd say it's our school attitude. So what are our attitudes? What do we say about families? I know some of the things we say about families is, hard to reach communities, it's hard to reach communities. And by saying these labels, we're making it harder for us to reach them already because we're having these assumptions. People have assumptions about people. And I go to different schools and I speak to them about what their assumptions, being honest with yourself as a school. What are your assumptions? What are you saying about Roma families? Or what are you saying about certain groups of the communities, about Muslim families or Asian families or African families or whichever families they are? What are your assumptions about them? What are you thinking about them? I had a session recently, a really amazing session with some schools, and they were being really honest. And one teacher said to me, oh, but the Muslim ladies stay together and they stay in the corner. They don't feel comfortable coming up to me. And I said, but how do you know they don't feel comfortable coming up to you? Like, where has that assumption come from you? Maybe they're just socializing, or maybe you, I don't know. Like, why are we making these assumptions? So don't make assumptions, meet people where they are and take away the assumptions. I mean, I know the Roma community have a lot of assumptions made about them, but they're actually the most, they're very resilient. A lot of our Roma children are very happy. You know, they might not value the pen and the paper sometimes, but those children have a lot of self-confidence. They're really loved. And these families know how to have a laugh, you know, they have the best sense of humor. Even if I don't have the language, I had a Roma mum once that she described to me an operation she had to go to Romania for, and it was on her liver because she pointed to that part of her body, acted out the operation in front of me. And anesthesia, and we had it's just like, I loved it in the middle of the playground. So actually, you know, look at the strengths of these communities, the asset base, really look at the strengths and think about your language. What are you using in your school? How are you creating those barriers with your language to open up and to make sure that schooling is accessible for everybody and that everyone feels welcome at your school? So to start off with, there's certain things I think that will help bridge that gap with communities. And I'd say the first one's open communication. Second one's getting them involved in your school life. So having parents involved, communities, families involved in school. And the final one, the ideal one, is having them integrated into school life. Having them integrated, it's great because they're just part of the school fabric and they help you. I mean, I'm in my school, we are like all other state schools, we're struggling for staffing. You know, SEND needs are rising. We don't have that many, we don't have enough staff in the classrooms. And actually for us, parents are key. Having parents on board is key. Having parents in school is key, because the more they're part and integrated in school, the more we can get the work done and we can support these children better. And when we do this, we develop a strong sense of belonging connection with families, which hopefully I will show you how. So communication, so thinking about the school in general, our staff inside and outside approachable. I think Gemma touched upon that. Is everybody approachable? Does everybody enjoy meeting the families and communities? If not, why not? Does anybody have any views that might, you know, do they have these assumptions? Addressing them and being honest about this. Is the space welcoming and easy to use? I had a mum once who actually found the gates really intimidating, because you know you have the buttons and you press them to make the gates open or to go into the front office. She found she actually started crying. She didn't understand how the whole thing worked, so I had to talk her through it. So you know, just is it easy to use? If it's, and also show them. Don't assume people know how to use things. Show people. What's the linguistic landscape like? Can people see something of themselves? The amount of emotional reaction I get because I represent all the languages at school. We have a multilingual library which hosts over 45 languages. The emotional reaction I get from people when they visit, when they see their language in a book, even if it's shown that any like very kind of minute language that's a minority, everyone wants to be represented. Everybody wants to feel seen. Everybody wants to be part of it. And I don't like to think anyone's excluded. So actually, are people, can they see themselves in the landscape? Do they feel part of school? And are we making assumptions again? Are we making assumptions about them, about the community, about the way about the way they respond to us? Are we making the assumptions? If you are making assumptions, ask and speak to them directly, or ask somebody who might know. And how are we utilising skills of multilingual families? I love this quote, which is schools and districts that view language and culture as a valuable asset rather than a problematic deficit tend to create more positive environments that are more conducive to EAL student success. And thinking about how we're making things accessible and easy for families. As I said, we are a very vibrant school, very busy school, and lots of families joining us all the time. So the first thing is, how can we get them involved? So making learning accessible as quickly as possible. The first two pictures here, this is a Roma child, a lot of our Roma families don't come to school, you know, on a Monday or a Friday, or if it's raining, or if it's windy, or if there's a birthday, or if there's a wedding, or if there's, you know, they've got lots of, or they're going back home quite a lot. And actually, some of our Roma families came into school to see how their child learned, how the children were learning phonics, you know, in the morning, because a lot of our challenges are that they've not been to school. So we're teaching them phonics and literacy skills and how to hold a pen. So getting them involved and showing them that, you know, breaking down that barrier, getting them into school, showing them how it looks so that they can see the impact of their child maybe missing some sessions and how that will stop them learning how to read quickly. This is a session on family phonics, so getting families in again as an after school club. So getting them joining them in with phonics. So any of those children that are part of our multilingual phonics, getting them in to show how we can do different things in different ways, so families know how it works. Not talking to them, but doing it with them, which is easier. Multilingual story times. We ran a research project with the London Metropolitan University a couple of years ago. They set up a multilingual library at Kensington. They started it off with us, and I didn't realize the impact would be so, I mean, straight away, having books in different languages. I didn't realize how emotional parents and children got, and how much of a connection they felt to school, seeing their languages there. I still remember a little French girl bringing children in to show them the French book, because that's her. So, or children that are new coming in and sometimes feeling more comfortable just sitting in with their books. So these are regular events happening at Kensington, where families and parents come in and they read in their languages to the school community. And what's lovely about this, as children go to any language that they want, so all the languages are equal, and children, you know, dip in and out of all the languages, and actually using the parents' expertise, so the family's expertise, what are their expertise, bring them in and use it in the school. Also, we do a lot of sessions called Learn with Your Child, having parents come in and families come in just to learn one of our key curriculum areas. So this is when I did multilingualism at Kensington. So we had a lot of different classes going across the school that we teach. So year ones were learning a lesson on sounds in different languages. So they came into year one, parents came into the classrooms and saw how they were learning about sounds, so how the A sound was in different languages. And they were doing some artwork around that. Year threes were looking at measurements, but they were doing maths and measurements, but they created rulers in different languages with their families. And what did parents learn from these sessions? So after a long time, I'm seeing my language numbers. We speak daily Telugu, but never thought of telling our child the Telugu numbers. This is a thought-invoking session. How important it is to promote our first language. I understand now that my children don't know how to write in Romanian. I will change it. The importance of celebrating and engaging in non-English languages spoken at home in the school curriculum, not just from an ideological perspective, but from an academic one. Fascinating to learn how children from multi-language backgrounds actually perform better in secondary level exams than those who identify as a monolanguage. So we're constantly using best research. I work with the UCL with Professor Roberto and some other partners, and any of the research we're putting into practice at Kensington, and we share it with parents. We had a lovely session last year where we had question time with some professors, and the parents, educators and schools, everybody came together to learn what does being multilingual mean. And it's really important that they understand how to use their languages to effectively learn, because it's such a gift and it's such an asset. And actually these children, as Heather mentioned before, from the latest research, they far outperform monolingual children. So how can we make sure these families are not losing their literacy skills, not losing their language? And it's a constant message that we have to keep doing, and getting parents engaged and involved in this process. And then involved. So actually parents are volunteer and they're involved in our school. A massive part of workforce for us is our volunteers. And when a new parent comes and they've got no experience, the best thing we can do for them is get them in as a volunteer. Being a volunteer means that they're part of school, they're part of a community. Secondly, they pick up skills. And thirdly, we need the languages. Have different children coming in all the time, so we need languages. And parents, their confidence and their skills really increases. So if you can see here, I've got some pictures. So you've got a parent who's helping in the library. We don't have a librarian. We have, 650 children, a massive library, and it's so hard to keep on top of. So we have a group of parents, different parents volunteer at different times, and they help set up the library and run things in the library. These are pictures of 2 of the after-school clubs. We have after-school clubs in different languages, whatever languages we can showcase, we use. So staff run after-school clubs in different languages, support staff, and parents run them as well. So this is a Romanian parent in the middle running Romanian club, and this is a Turkish parent running Turkish club in the corner. The Turkish parent and the Romanian parent now is a teacher, qualified teacher, and she's teaching at another school. So that was her journey at the beginning. And the Turkish parent, actually, she's a Turkish teacher, but she hasn't got the qualifications here. But I mean, she's an amazing teacher, honestly. So trying to get them in as quickly as possible and skill them up, I feel really empowers our community and empowers the children, because children see their parents growing in confidence, and it really helps the children. So parents help with library, coffee mornings, front office, classroom, language clubs, interventions, anything and everything. I've got some grandparents I've seen come in the mornings in year 6, and they do reading with some year 6 children. And I just think, why create these barriers? Why not make it easy as possible? I mean, with the Turkish parent, the DBS was a bit difficult and it wasn't coming through. So I sat with her after school club, but then took my laptop in, but then she was just too interesting. I ended up learning Turkish with the children because she was so fantastic. And what happens when families support us? I just want to give you another example. So we have school, we don't have much space. So, and what is lovely with not having much space is our staff are very used to families and parents using the staff room. So we all use it. And before, I would say 7, 8 years ago, I've been at the school for 11 years, it would always be a very much barrier that parents, staff would say, oh my God, why are parents using the staff room? It's our space. And since COVID and since our community engagement kind of changed, I think, and parent and staff were using families and parents more in the classrooms, I felt that staff value parents more and families more. So if you come to our staff room, if you come to school, even our staff training, sometimes parents are allowed to come to that if they're interested. You'll see some parents, you won't know that they're parents, they're just they're having lunch with us, they're singing with us, they're decorating with us, they're just part of our fabric, they're in school, they're not separate from school. We don't have a parent morning, they're just part of the fabric. So we were setting up this outside space, our caretaker left, so we were going to create a community space. I got some funding and I ordered loads of IKEA furniture. But I'm not very good at making IKEA furniture. I don't have much time. My caretaker doesn't like IKEA furniture. I didn't know this at that time. And so he said to me, Sophia, why did you order IKEA? I don't like IKEA. So I was really struggling. Then my executive head, Ben, said to me, this is an autumn term last year, that Sophia, why don't you just put it out to parents? And I always feel a bit like, oh, well, who will respond? So I put a message out and parents turned up to help. So here are some of the parents, but actually the real champion is the lady there. Her name is Ferdos. She knows I'm sharing her story. She's quite happy for me to share her story. She's a Syrian refugee. She has 5 children. That's her husband in one of the pictures. And she actually came every morning with a screwdriver and a coffee. And she'd make the furniture every single morning. And then she got the men and other community members involved, and she designed and she set up the furniture. And now she has the key code and she sets up and she runs things in the house for me for pets. So community can just use the house. They have like mornings where they just go in, and they make tea and coffee themselves and they run their own mornings in that house. And it's also used by us. And I'm upstairs in this house, so I can always hear the noise, and there's different groups of parents that use it, which is lovely. And the fact is, this is their space. And just to show you how integrated Ferdos is. So Ferdos, I mean, she came to plant bulbs because she didn't like the way the front of our school was looking scrappy, as you can see here. She's got her husband digging here. So I came into school one day. I was like, well, Ferdos, what are you doing? She's like, oh, don't worry. She's so she's got her husband to help her. Library that I have here. I ordered it and it was wonky and it wasn't closing properly. And I kept asking the caretaker to fix it. And he's got 100 jobs. So she fixed it all up for me. And this is what she likes to do. She has now taken control of that house. She descales the kettle. She looks after the parents and community that come in. And she loves that. That's what she likes to do. And actually asking people to help you changes things. Like, we always kind of try and empower parents, but actually get them to come and help you, because this is where they have this is her purpose. She comes in, she washes the sofa covers, she'll ask me for the hoover. I say to her, please don't hoover, we've got a cleaner. But she likes to look after us, and she'll feed us and she'll cook for us. Winter fair, sorry, she brought in a fattoush salad for everybody, just fed everybody out of the goodness of her heart. But this is, you know, I just thought it's lovely. And just to show you her integrated in the house, trust, and creating a strong sense of belonging and connection with us. I just want to end on a couple more stories. So being part of their journey and seeing where they progress to. We've got lots of stories like this at Kensington, but this one, again, with her permission, I'm sharing Jade's story. So meet Jade. This is Jade here. She's now a midday supervisor. That's her son with her. And so Jade came to us a couple of years ago volunteering. Jade is from the UK, born and brought up here. Her husband is Jamaican, so they speak patois as well. And Jade struggled with confidence. So she has a lot of anxiety, and she wasn't leaving the house, especially when COVID hit. And it took a lot of guts for her to come to us and say to us that I need help with my confidence, and how can I help in school? So she slowly started helping out in the library. And in the library, she started having less anxiety attacks coming out of the house, and she started building up her confidence in the library. And then she just blossomed. She was over, you know, she ran the library. She really grew into herself and got other parents involved in the library. And because she's such a part of the school, now she's got a job now. She's a midday supervisor. And I just think it's so fantastic to see her, like, this wouldn't have been her taking a photo a few years ago. But this is her and her children, how it's impacted her and her family is amazing. And I'm not saying she still doesn't struggle. She does struggle because she wants to run a book club. And I keep saying, Jade, when are you going to start your book club? She's like, oh, Sophia, I'm not. I get anxiety when I think about it. So it's okay. When you're ready, I'll sit with you and we'll start it together. But just understanding and having them part of the school makes such a difference. And the final story is Catalina. So meet Catalina. So Catalina is, again, a parent at our school, a Romanian parent. Her 2 children are at our school, and she started volunteering with me maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And then, so she ran clubs for me, after school clubs, remaining club, came to anything that I ran. And then a couple of years ago, she started looking for a job because she's like, her confidence grew, her English qualifications grew. So she's looking for a job. And we needed help in the front office. We were advertising for roles in the front office, and the people that were applying were highly qualified. Kathleen doesn't have the qualifications for running in the front office. But as she was helping, she is better than 5 qualified people. She is faster. She is so fast. But you can ask her to do 10 things. She'll run and do them, you know, with enthusiasm and joy, and by telling you how amazing it is being at school. And actually having her who speaks Romanian and Italian in the front office is so much more beneficial for us. And actually, I'm so grateful that the school agreed to employ her. And now she's thriving. She's in a front office, and it's her job every day. And this is what she said: I felt valued here. This gave me the confidence to get qualifications. Now I'm in my dream job. I love coming to work every day. And yeah, I'll end it there. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Sylvia. That is incredible. And what really strikes me, and I think comes through so much, is we've heard from, you know, Heather about her research and the recommendations, and Gemma as well, talking about you know, taking an asset-based approach, and then what we've just heard from you is what happens when you actually apply the recommendations and the things they've been talking about. And I think it just shows how powerful that can be. And yeah, thank you. So, you know, it's really easy, isn't it, these days, to feel quite deflated when talking about education and challenges. And it's wonderful to come away with so many positive stories. And we only have a few minutes left, sadly, but I do have a couple of questions that came through. One of which I think probably, Sophia, you might be able to speak to, but it's: how would you encourage reading at home for parents who don't have literacy in their home language? This is a really good question. Don't know if you have any thoughts.
So I don't know if anybody wants to join in, but I mean, we have many parents that don't have literacy in their home language. And I think storytelling is fine, just speaking and using your words. You know, I think that we really must be encouraging families to read to talk about stories in their home language. So that conversation, that communication in home language is super powerful. That is what those children need. And the more you empower parents and you say to them that, you know what, it's okay if you can't read it. It's okay if you don't have a book in your home language, you don't have a story. As long as you talk to them and have those meaningful conversations in home language, that is when that child will have those deeper conversations, and the English will catch up, and that will support that child. But we need to be empowering parents and making it as easy as possible.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it goes back to what I was saying around, you know, you can teach children to read in school, but you can't teach them to love reading. And conversations around stories are just as important when it comes to developing that love of reading. And maybe it's about, you know, thinking about other ways of reading as well. So, for example, audiobooks, they're accessible for everybody. You know, you can listen to the story and then talk about what you've heard, talk about the characters, talk about what the author was trying to create, talk about how the story makes you feel. All of those things are what creates a love of reading, and that's what parents can really contribute.
Absolutely. And as I said, that can be done in any language, just that talking and that yeah, facilitating of ideas and stories. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so we have one last question that came in the chat, well, question or comment, which was that somebody was really interested in getting examples of booklets of parents. So I just want to signpost to them that I think Caroline posted a link to the guidance, the translated guidance for parents that the foundation has, but also in Heather's slide, she had a list of things that parents want to know about, and I'm sure throughout as well, both Gemma and Sophia mentioned the kind of things that it's useful for parents to know about, be aware of. So hopefully that's given you some ideas. Okay, Caroline, I'm going to hand over to you just to finish things off and signpost a few of our resources to people that they might find useful.
Thanks, Tom. Can you see the QR code to the guidance on the screen already. So
Yes.
these are the resources that we're referring to that have been translated already, and really delighted as well that early next month we will also be launching about the Welsh education system. So and a huge thank you to our colleagues in Wales who've supported with that piece of work. We've got some surveys still out. There are 3 surveys out at the moment. We'll share all of the links, but there's the QR codes if you're interested in any particular one of those. You've perhaps seen them on social media already. We're doing a piece of work on late arrivals, and we'd really love to hear about your experiences of working with students arriving in Year 9 and beyond. We're looking at how our teaching resources and guidance is being used, and looking at how we can really think about improving that. And we're also looking at potentially developing a digital tracker for the EAL assessment. So if any of those surveys are of interest to you, you could feel that you could contribute, we'd be so grateful. And there's a draw for one of 10 £20 book tokens for each of the surveys, as well as a thank you. So that's those. We've got the next webinar is likely to be the launch of our SEND open online free course that will be coming up really soon. We're very excited about that. And we've got the next courses are all on the website as well. So you can see that there's embedding EAL assessment and the teaching assistance course. So they're the courses that we run ourselves. And then if you're looking for training, you can also look on the regional training page, where we have a map with all of our licensed practitioners and information about the training that they've got available. So, for example, I've just pulled off the one that was for the West Midlands. So please do take a look at what training's lined up from our licensed partners. And then finally, we have launched only last week, the EAL accreditation by the Bell Foundation, which is now open for schools with really who are really thrilled with their EAL provision and want to have that recognised. So we've already got international accreditation, and now we've got the accreditation for UK schools as well. So please do go and take a look, and we'd be really delighted to hear from you if you're interested in being able to use this kite mark. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing. And massive thank you to the speakers as well.
Caroline. Yeah, absolutely. Huge thank you to everybody. Heather, Gemma and Sophia, that was amazing. It was great to hear so many of your insights and yeah, amazing ideas. And I can see from the chat that people are really appreciating it as well. So yeah, thank you everyone for attending. A few people are asking about links and things like that. Please, we will send you, keep an eye on your inboxes. We'll send you an email with a link to the recording of this webinar, and we will include links to things we've been talking about as well. So don't worry if you missed something. And yeah, and likewise, if you do go to our website, and you can sign up to our mailing list as well, and then you'll get notified about future opportunities and trainings too. Okay, well, have a fabulous evening and afternoon, everybody. Yeah, thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks very much.